Colleagues, we'll just begin. Welcome to the November meeting of the Communities Committee. Do we have, number one, do we have any apologies or substitutes, please?
I think, Andrew, could you give the apologies, please? You've been notified of any apologies? Apologies, Chair. Andrew, have you got apologies?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute there. Councillor Brown is substituting for the Provost. That's the only apology I've got. Thanks.
Thank you. Number two, declarations of interest. Any colleagues have a declaration? Councillor Stewart first.
Yeah, declaring interest in item 7, report 286/20. It's under section 3, financial or non-financial interests of other persons. I've got a relative who has a financial interest in this, and I will not participate in the discussion or any voting.
Thank you. Councillor Cheap.
Thanks, Convener. Just regarding item 8, report 287/20, Thistle Street, Carnoustie, I have met with a number of the residents of that street regarding this paper and have formed no opinion, so I'll take part in the debate and vote.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No? All okay, brilliant. Move on to number 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Are these agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Can I ask you to take your hand down, Councillor Stewart, please? Thank you. Go on to number 4, information report. The first one is the communities. Any questions? Councillor Speed.
Thank you. I just wondered if, I don't know if if John Moore was on the call, but if he could just confirm with regards to people fleeing from domestic abuse situations, how we will support these types of presentations.
Mr. Morrow, are you with us today?
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, Councillor Speed, we always support people who are fleeing domestic abuse, whether that's from within Angus or whether that's across borders. To some extent, that falls into a special category where we always take extra measures to help anybody that, with any support that's required. So to some extent, it is covered in, if you like, in a sort of exemption to the current arrangements, and will continue. The Scottish Government's consultation does touch on that, but we haven't made specific mention of it in our response. But certainly, we've got no intention to change that, and probably provide even more support than we have done in the past.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for those reassurances. And like you say, it was just because it wasn't kind of highlighted in the report. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah, thank you.
Any other colleague have a question? No. Okay, we'll move on to the number 2, infrastructure. Any questions? No, that's great. Thank you very much. Move on to report number 5, the interim management rules for Kempty Park and Pond Arbroath. Any questions? Councillor MacDonald?
More a question and a comment, if that's okay, Convener.
Sorry, was that a question first, Jess?
That's more a comment, I suppose, actually.
Right, I'll just double check there's nobody else got questions. Any other colleagues have questions? No? Okay, the floor is yours, Mark.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, everybody. Really interested in reading these rules and how we go about sort of protecting our environments and parks, and I think it's important that we obviously go with recommendations today. However, as we'll be consulting on future rules for our open spaces and museums and things like that. I think we should really look at the language that we use in what these rules are and what they say about us, because do we as a council really want to be going out and consulting the public with the way that some of these rules have been written? There's a few examples that they just seem very old-fashioned and very, you know, very sort of no balls allowed here kind of mentality, rather than a open, accessible, please use our parks, please use our open spaces. And then there was just a couple of things in the actual rules themselves where I think personally some of how I would understand the definitions of a vehicle could be interpreted to exclude certain things that we don't intend to exclude from our parks, like buggies, bikes, things like that. So yeah, it was just a comment basically to say that I think if we're going forward, I would personally like to see us look at how we write these rules and how we present ourselves to the public so they can feed into us in a more sort of modern way, I think.
Thank you for that, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Brace contacted me on Friday regarding this, and we had a discussion which I'm in full agreement with. I think, as you know, this is an interim report, and we'll move to a more formal report in the future, and I'm happy to accept that we need to simplify the language. Maybe before I bring in Councillor Cheap, I could maybe ask Mr. Ball just to give a little bit of an overview, that the officers understand and accept that request.
Absolutely, Convener, and thanks for the opportunity. Yes, take on board what Councillor MacDonald said. Obviously, the spirit of these management rules, if you like, is to persuade people to behave responsibly when they're using our parks and open spaces. And we're now, if the report's approved today, we go into a public consultation period. So I'd be more than happy to listen to any feedback in relation to how the wording of the specific management rules is changed. And if Councillor MacDonald or any other member wishes to email me directly with any comments on suggested changes to the wording, I'd be more than happy to take these on board.
Thank you. Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, I just like to support what Mark said and what Stuart's supporting on. I think when I read through this, the rules, and there were 7 pages long, and I thought, for users, how are we really expecting people to work along with these when, you know, working through a lot of, sounds like a lot of red tape in there. I think it could be much more simplified to make it readable to people, to the layman, as we've often say here. I know we've got to use certain language in it, but there's an awful lot by about page 2 or page 3 I just turned off completely, and if I do, the man in the street is. So I think we just need to keep it, make it far more simple in a summary version, and if we have to have some backup to it hidden away somewhere, fine, but let's make it easy to read for the layman that keeps them interested.
Thank you. I think we're all in agreement with that. Councillor Durno.
Thanks, Convener. In the light of what happened to one of my parks last week, I am asking for a meeting with Councillor Speed and Councillor Wan regarding the security of some of our parks, because we have some parks that have floodlights on at night, and the gates are not locked, and individuals are going in and wrecking the parks, and it's costing thousands of pounds. So it's something that I'd like to speak to my colleagues about, and maybe yourself as well, Mark, regarding security in some of these parks, because I don't think a lot of these parks need to be accessible at night time, especially just now, the dark nights, different in the summertime, but that might be able to keep them a bit more secure if they were padlocked up at night and opened again in the morning. So it's something I'd like to bring out to the committee to try and speak about at a later date.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm happy to come along to a meeting of the ward members, and we shall invite the relevant officers to join us.
We have got the public, we do have the police, community police full support on this, and just looking at something that we can take forward that's going to, you know, stop spending so much money on these parks getting demo, you know, done at night time. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor MacDonald, your hand's still up. Did you have a follow-up? Thank you. And anybody else have any comments to make? No. We'll just move to the recommendations. Are the recommendations agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you. Move on to number 6, Road Safety Framework to 2030. I'm going to ask Mr. Scott to probably take us through this.
Thank you, convener. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, this is quite an important report. As reports go, we've been moving towards this stage with the Road Safety Member Officer Working Group, where we have the framework coming through the Road Safety Framework to 2030, which has been published for consultation by Scottish Government. Before you this afternoon is the recommended responses to that, which has been reviewed by the Road Safety Member Officer Working Group. Also presented this afternoon is the response that we have provided already to the Highway Code consultation, which again went through the Road Safety Member Officer Working Group for comments and for review. Again, a critical document. It will instigate, if it passes, significant change in terms of how we use our roads and how we use our paths. And therefore, it's a very important document for us all to be recognising, and also for us to be getting the message out to the people of Angus as to what these changes are once they come into force. And really the third main element is to identify, as has been reported previously and approved by committee, on the remit of the Road Safety Member Officer Working Group. As an officer and being responsible for it, I would like to think it's working very well. And therefore, in terms of that work, we'd like to specifically identify the active travel projects that we've taken there for consultation and for review. And therefore, we'd be asking the committee to formally recognise the role of that particular member officer working group in picking up these very vital pieces of work as we go forward. And of course, we'll continue to prepare reports and updates back to the main committee as to the activities of the member officer working group. Thank you.
Mr. Scott. Any questions from colleagues? Councillor Braze.
Yes, thank you, convener. Yes, I would agree that this is quite a big body of work this before us today, an awful lot of information in it. And I would agree with Mr. Scott that the Road Safety Member Officer Working Group is doing a lot of good work. It has probably been hindered a bit by the amount of time that we've had to spend on COVID specific issues, and it's probably pushed us back a wee bit from where we'd like to be, but we'll make up that ground. I did have a question though. On page 47, the rules for cyclists, rule number 63. Now, we went through this consultation, the response at the Member Officer Working Group, and it didn't occur to me at the time, but in consultation with colleagues, I think that it would have been perhaps better if at that rule 63 we had mentioned or included assistance dogs in there. Now, of course, the consultation has been submitted. I think the deadline's by now, so perhaps it's too late, but maybe will there be an opportunity to add to the consultation at a later date?
Councillor Race, thank you. Yes, there is a huge amount of detail, and as I say, I'm thankful for the patience and the diligence of the MOG to go through each one of these. Invariably with that detail, there is the chance that we miss something, and we wish to add that later on. What we should see from the consultation on the Highway Code is a report which will actually capture the other aspects of that consultation. I would hope that perhaps others have picked that very point up, in which case we could confirm that was the case. If it's not been picked up, I'm sure we could make communication that we would wish that to be addressed. So I'm hopeful that we haven't missed all opportunities in terms of the next revision. So we'll be looking out for the report on the consultation so that we can comment accordingly and perhaps add that specific point.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Speed.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, really just a comment to say that I welcome this report, and I really do hope that our citizens within Angus will engage with this work and consultation. And I think, you know, anything that we can do to help reach our environmental targets and kind of create healthier places and spaces within Angus, the better. I fully support active travel, but I know that that can often be difficult. Choice of travel method and getting around for people, especially pedestrians, who are often challenged, or you know, for families wanting to take their children out on bikes and things. You know, the roads can really be quite hazardous and difficult. So I really support this piece of work and look forward to seeing better outcomes so that we can indeed maximise our health and well-being outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Just a quick comment, convener. It's basically to look at point 3 of the recommendations. I came late onto the MOG, and I've been impressed by how the MOG's worked. I think that each member on that MOG brings something a bit different to each meeting, and it's been really good to see us working in a way that we have up to now. So just to reiterate that point, I think it's really effective, and it's been incredibly useful and insightful for me as a councillor as well.
Thank you, and I would say I share your views. We have worked extremely well together. Any other colleagues have comments? No. Can we agree the 3 recommendations, please? Thank you. We go on to report number 7. I'm conscious that Councillor Stewart has to leave us, so we'll just wait till we arrange for him to opt out.
Someone put me in the lobby, or do I just leave?
Mr. Macaskill, can you give us some advice, please?
He's been moved to the waiting room now.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. So, report number 7, surplus property. Is there any questions on
I've
this?
been put back in here, Mark.
Oh, right.
I was out and then somebody's put me back in.
Can one of the officers just confirm when Councillor Stewart's in the lobby, please?
Yeah, he's in the lobby. I don't know what happened there. Apologies.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much. Okay, right. We'll just go back to where I was. Is there any questions on this report? Any comments? Councillor Duff?
Yes, convener. I'm conscious that you've got responsibility for disposing of surplus property. I was horrified this week to discover that the council still has the Montrose homeless unit on the books. 2 years after I was assured by the strategic director that the sale was imminent, we were just waiting on a few conveyancing details. So that was clearly well wide of the mark, and that's a real embarrassment that we've still got that on the books.
I don't know if one of the officers would like to address Councillor Duff's comments. This is an operational matter.
Convener, do you want me to come in there? It's John Morrow.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think Councillor Duff, it has been unfortunate the length of time the conveyancing has taken. Partly it's to do with the complexity of the asset itself, as you know, which is spread over not just over several floors, but along the close of Queen's Close itself, and there's a number of neighbouring properties, all of which date back to quite a long time ago. What emerged during the conveyancing process was that the title deeds didn't necessarily match the layouts on the ground. So legal colleagues have had to go through a series of corrective conveyancing processes, and that means contacting other parties and their solicitors to try and get agreement on what those title deeds should look like. So that has made the conveyancing a lot more complex than most asset disposals. That then led us into the start of the pandemic situation, whereon most house moves and house sales pretty much halted for a while. Now, although that has started again, we're still suffering the lag in timescale. We are trying to push on the process with the other parties, but as you say, we haven't achieved completion. but we're still hopeful now that we're going to get that. I hate to say soon, but then you were told that 2 years ago. So I appreciate it's very frustrating.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Can
I just ask, is the potential purchaser still interested in purchasing after the delay?
I don't really think, Councillor Duff, this is a matter for this report. We're actually discussing the 2 items on this report. I would suggest that you would discuss that with Mr. Morrow outside this meeting, and we'll just move back to the report. So, colleagues, is there any questions or comments on the 2 items that are on this report? No. Are we happy to agree the recommendations in this report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Move on to report number 8, which is Thistle Street, Carnoustie, road safety.
Convener, could I just pause a minute to allow Councillor Stewart?
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, fire away.
And John, would you be able to let Councillor Stewart from the lobby into the meeting, please?
That's him being admitted into the meeting now.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Stewart, we've moved on to report number 8, the Thistle Street, Carnoustie road safety. I was going to ask Mr. Cochrane maybe just to give a brief overview on this report and the time it's actually taken us to get to where we are today. And then I think Councillor Cheap will have maybe some questions. So maybe just get Mr. Cochrane just to give us a brief overview on this.
Thank you, Convener. Indeed, Thistle Street has been the subject of some discussion in the past and several site meetings, and has continued to be a source of complaint from one of the residents of the cul-de-sac off Thistle Street, who I understand regularly contacts the police when he is unable to exit the cul-de-sac. The Thistle Street itself is quite a congested route in terms of on-street parking, and on-street parking is a relative premium, as it is in other areas of Carnoustie. But the challenge that exists is in terms of obeying the highway code, where vehicles shouldn't be parked opposite a junction, which is what causes the difficulty at this particular spot. So we did have this in the traffic orders that we brought to you in February, and at that point it was deferred for consideration of a one-way system. So this report brings back that consideration of the one-way system with a view of going out to consultation on that proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Cochrane. Councillor Cheap, do you have some questions?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for staying the course with this one. It is taking a long time, and I can understand other people who are not in the ward perhaps saying could just move on, but it's extremely important to the residents of Thistle Street, both who are affected in all sorts by the complainants and by people who are trying to defend, as Mr. Cochrane has just said, the premium of being able to park at all in the streets. So that said, it's really just some questions perhaps to be addressed to Mr. Cochrane and perhaps to Mr. Scott, if you don't mind. Ahead of all of this, I'd like to summarise it. I'd like to try and get an idea of what timing and length of consultation will be put in place here, and how are the residents to be consulted? Because I know that's bit in the paper. I would like just to get formalised on that, what actual consultation is going to be done, because obviously there's been argument in the past, particularly with winter time, that attaching things to the lampposts in the winter is not the best methodology. So I'd like to find out a bit more about that. Also, a bit of clarification on, it may actually be that a combination of some double yellow lines and the one-way system actually might be appropriate here, and I want to get some assurance that could be considered rather than either or, because it could just be that there's one particular spot that's causing a problem, but the one-way system is needed along with it, but perhaps less restrictive yellow lines than is being suggested. Finally, to know how the results of the consultation will be considered and then an implementation time. So if we can just kind of start with timing and length of consultation first, I'd be interested to hear on that. And if you haven't answered everything that I'm bringing up, if you don't mind, I might come back to you, Mark, and just say.
That's okay, yeah.
So over to Ian or to Walter.
Well, thank you through yourself, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Cheap. I'll try and keep the three things in my head. In terms of the consultation, as you say, sometimes site notices aren't the best, but actually site notices are the legal requirement. So therefore, we absolutely have to do the signs on the lampposts. But as per the report and Appendix 4, what we've said is we'll do a letter drop to all of the properties that are encompassed in that envelope on Appendix 4. And we'll do that as soon as possible. We're conscious, obviously, as we move into next week, we're into December. We also contact, as a matter of routine, and again, as a statutory process, community councils, blue light services, etc., as set out in Appendix 3. So once we get those responses, as we would do with other traffic restrictions, and as per the recommendation, we would bring a report back to you in terms of those responses. And I suppose the next item on committee, the Westway pedestrian crossing, is just an illustration of how we've done that. That's now at the end of the consultation and has come back to you. In terms of certainly the report is set out as an either or, because in theory the real challenge of coming out of the cul-de-sac on Thistle Street is to turn left on Thistle Street, which is where, if we installed the double yellow lines, then that would prohibit parking and would enable that manoeuvre. If we were to make it one way, then we would be minded that it would be it forced the cul-de-sac to turn right. So we would be open to your suggestion of whether there is a mix of the two, or a blend there of some double yellow lines still required, even if it was a one-way system. But happy to have that conversation offline, or indeed as part of the consultation with your good self as local member. Okay. And I think that answers all your questions.
Just a bit, Ian, from the point of you should told me the process, but again, timing and length of consultation would be, are we talking X number of months between now, this being the end of November, and documents will go out pre-Christmas, post-Christmas, and will consultation finish by spring? It's just to give an idea of how long we're talking about.
Thank you. Sorry. The normal consultation on these matters would be around the 28 days. Because we're doing a letter drop, we might have been minded to be a little bit quicker, but we're conscious, obviously, as we move into the festive season. We certainly won't make the January Communities Committee, but I'd be minded that the cycle after that, which would be either end of February or March, I'm sorry, I haven't got my dates, would be the one that we would aim for. And that should allow adequate time for the consultation responses to come back to us, irrespective of Christmas.
Okay, and the final question on that, then Ian, just to wrap up on it, thanks, is just, again, if after February, March, potentially, whatever's agreed there, and if we went on either of these for one-way system or double yellow lines, implementation of these would take roughly how long after that, perhaps?
That's where it gets a little bit challenging in terms of the legal order. We normally talk about around 9 months for that, in order to get both the legal order and then obviously the physical works. It's not so much involved, obviously, if it was double yellow lines, but if it was to do the one-way system, it needs signage to go along with that.
Okay. Thanks very much for your time. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hopefully I've covered everything. Thank you, Karina.
Any other colleague? I did see Councillor Moore's hand up, but it's down again. Anybody else have any questions? No? Any comments? No? Well, I'm going to remove the report as is. So are the recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Move on to number 9, which is another good news story. Westway Arbroath pedestrian crossing. Are there any questions? Any Arbroath member, Councillor Speed?
Yep, thank you, convener. Yeah, it was just in response to the report and the consultation and the feedback. It is disappointing that there are only 3 comments from members of the public. However, I think within that there is kind of a quite a depth and a breadth of information that even from those 3 comments that have come through. So, you know, it's been highlighted kind of concerns around further congestion, but also recognising that it could provide a safe passageway, especially for children being able to access green spaces. I also note that there was suggestions around kind of interactive crossing, an interactive crossing with maybe alternative solutions. And I know that that's something that I have raised before in terms of neat box and potential there to have a crossing that perhaps is able to allow people with kind of sight visual impairments to cross easier. I just wondered if officers could, I guess, yeah, just feedback as to what possibilities there are. And my kind of final point and kind of ask is around kind of that stretch on the Westway does have a cycle lane. However, it is often challenging because cars park on the Westway. So I think it would be good, kind of referring back to our earlier report in terms of our overall road safety vision, if we could incorporate all those kind of comments and suggestions and ideas into making sure that this particular project takes all those kind of active travel and pedestrian safety considerations into any installation.
Mr. Cochrane or Mr. Scott, who would like to address?
I'm happy to take that. Thanks, convener, for yourself. And if Mr. Scott wants to add anything, happy to do so. Thank you, Councillor Speed. As you know, we have looked at the technology element of pedestrian crossings previously. I'm not particularly familiar with, but I know Perth and Kinross Council had done some work during COVID to look at, you know, not having to touch the controls. But I also understand that that's been something they've reviewed. So we will get in. Happy to get in contact with colleagues across there in terms of how they've progressed that, and happy to look at the technology element here again and see if it's suitable. I think, as you say, the provision of the crossing at the moment, it is a site where the school crossing patroller is, but this will give a wider benefit in terms of other times of the day when the crossing patroller is not there. So it will indeed help that active travel. But as with always, we're happy to incorporate the cycling element of that, although cyclists, of course, have to stop at red lights as well. So there's that element of that. So happy to take that on. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it wasn't that, you know, that cyclists wouldn't be obviously adhering to and engaging in the traffic lights. It was more just that kind of journey and making sure, I guess, it kind of takes into consideration that journey and the challenges that there can be and the obstacles that can often be faced by pedestrians and indeed cyclists, especially when there is a cycle lane but cars are often parked in it, and it can often be a kind of staggered journey of stopping and starting. So yeah, I think if we can just take that into consideration, that would be great.
I mean, if I just come in and add to what Ian said there, I think it's what I would suggest in that regard. Now, our response is very open to new technology, but it has to be appropriate technology, and it has to be the right location. And we are keen to explore innovation where it's appropriate. What we wouldn't want to do, which is unfortunately the situation with Perth and Ross, where they've stepped forward with some innovation and been asked to withdraw that for more traditional reasons for that. So I think it is we're looking for the opportunity, I think, in that regard. We might, with other locations and with other projects, certainly within Arbroath, have opportunities that are coming up. But I do absolutely agree, as we've highlighted in previous committees, about needing that holistic view, that we're not just looking at this as a crossing, what other knock-on effects might we have in terms of the cycleway and provision that when we have and don't have the school crossing patrol there. So I think it's certainly something that's in the minds of the officers, and ultimately there's been the support and the interest from the members for us to continue to have that particular those issues in our minds. So thank you for the comments.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll be looking all over Angus for the opportunities to do this for crossings, not just Arbroath.
You're quite right, Convener. I apologise. All of Angus.
Have some colleagues' hands going up to make that point. Councillor Moore, you were next.
Thank you, Convener. I just want to refer to the consultation now. It says that it was used in Angus Council's website and social media. Was there any other method of consultation?
Mr. Cochrane or Mr. Scott, whoever can provide the answer.
I can cover on that one. Unfortunately, given the timescales and given the COVID restrictions, we were pretty restricted in that regard in terms of consultation. It's something we've been wrestling with, and not just with the move to digital, but we've certainly been slightly more restricted than we would have liked to have been in terms of a consultation. I don't think, having assessed this and discussed it with colleagues, I don't think that impacted too much on the number of responses. But it is something that we give a very regular and a constant eye to when we're putting out these consultations.
Thank you. I'll comment later.
Thank you, Councillor Braze.
Sorry, mine's a comment too.
Right. Well, any other colleagues have questions? No, we'll just move to comments. So, Councillor Braze, we'll let you start.
Well, yes, I did have a question, but Cllr Moore actually asked it. It was on the response to the consultation. It's a very busy piece of road. A lot of people use it, and an awful lot of people cross it as well. And it does just seem a very poor response. 3 people. So I wondered if you could expand, maybe, Walter, could you, on the consultation a wee bit?
Yeah, sure, Councillor Braze. It's always a challenge in terms of consultations that, as members will know as well as I do, it often has those in great opposition to something, or it has those in great support of it. I think what I would say is that, given that we'd undertaken previous engagement on this location previously, we had gone through the community council, we'd had those discussions. I would probably say in this regard, we were very well intentioned by going out to additional consultation, but certainly the local feeling that I'd picked up on was that it was fairly obvious where the crossing needed to go, and therefore I suspect an awful lot of people didn't feel the need to respond to the consultation. So I think there is that question, as perhaps Councillor Moore was indicating, as to how accessible the consultation was. But then I think there was also the added context there as to whether people felt that they wished to have their say in favour or not in favour of the chosen crossing location. So I would hope in that regard that it wasn't due to them not having known about it, and be more about the fact that they were content with the crossing location to go in as the members would recommend.
Yeah, that's fine, thanks. And I would just say that maybe Lois touched on this. You know, if we're going to try to give more encouragement to pedestrians and active travel, we need to shift the balance of power, and Brechin could certainly do with pedestrian. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, well, I'm sorry, I'm not very satisfied with social media and Angus Council's website. When we're coming out of lockdown, people have got a lot of things on their mind. Checking to see what's happening with the council is not necessarily one of them. There's no comment about what the community council's view is, and I would have thought that they should have been incorporated into this document. Personally, I don't have an argument with the location, but it's going to interact with at least one house where the red man or the green man is going to shine through their windows 24/7. I don't know whether that person has been consulted individually or whether they responded, but I'm sorry, I do not think that the consultation was adequate. And I would certainly ask that we go back and just do a letter drop in that immediate area so that people are aware of it.
Convener, I can confirm the Community Council we're in communication with them and received correspondence with them with the original report. In terms of location, as members will remember, this is additional consultation that was asked for based on a comment about the previous location that we identified, which did receive the consultation and the support from the Community Council. In terms of the specific impact of the crossing, as Councillor Moore suggests there, we can certainly be in touch with the location, and there are inevitably and invariably things that we can do about that kind of issue where there is a house that will be local to that might be impacted by the actual traffic signal. So we can certainly do that as part of the planning for that works to go ahead and accommodate any mitigation that's needed.
I'm sorry, Convener, I would have expected that to have been done before this report came to us.
Councillor Speed.
Thank you. It was really just a comment with regards to just thinking of, as I touched on earlier, that holistic approach and the works that are being done within the Timmer Greens area, especially with the regeneration of housing. So it was really just, I would imagine that there's discussions between kind of housing and our roads departments around, you know, the timing of those works to ensure that there is kind of, I guess, yeah, there's not too much interference and disturbance on residents when there could possibly be lots of works going on at the same time. But ultimately, I think that the place that we'll get to is a real enhancement of that local area.
Thank you. Councillor Durno, an Arbroath member.
I just want to say that this is great that we're getting this crossing here, because it's been a bit of a nightmare crossing there for years. People have had to run across the road and stop, you know, getting hit by an Arctic or something. And with the new parking restrictions coming in at the back of Muirfield School, more of the children will be walking to school. Their mums won't be driving up in the cars and parking at the back of Muirfield School and dropping them off. So I welcome this crossing. Like Lois is saying, we're going to be regenerating the whole area. So let's make it safer, and the kids can take their bikes to school. And I don't have a problem with it, and I think it's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Durno. I share your views. Is there any other colleague who wants to pass comment before I move the report? No. I would like to move the recommendations 1, 2 and 3. Are these agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Number 10 is exclusion of the public and the press. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so we'll have to leave the meeting now and come back in. Okay, so we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much.